The views and opinions expressed.
Be free. Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad.
Charles!
Nice, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Expressed on this program
Sir,
are
are you
those
okay?
of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. In October of 1994, BronxNet Television debuted its first talk show. This program, BronxTalk. I'm proud to have been the program's host for every one of its more than 850 shows. Tonight we celebrate the 18th anniversary of BronxTalk with a guest that I'm thrilled to have. I thought that on this year's anniversary show, I'd be indulgent. And so I thought we'd bring on a guest who I like, who I respect, and who has a lot to offer all of us. He is the author of this new book designed for young people, The Greatest Moments in Sports, Upsets and Underdogs. He's also the originator of thatsports.com, which we'll talk about more about tonight. But most people probably know him best as the former sports anchor for WNBC Channel 4. He still goes spanning the world at times where no one ever gets hurt. It's my pleasure to have Len Berman with us to help us celebrate our 18th anniversary. Hi, Len. Nice to have you with us.
The anniversary.
Thank you very much.
18 is a great number.
Folks, our phones are open tonight, so if you'd like to ask Len a sports question or make a comment, please join us at 718-960-7241. Len, great to have you here. Let's start at the beginning. I know you covered it in your first book, Spanning the World. But why sports? Something that you always wanted to do, or something that just happened for you, or did they say, hey, let's let Len do it? How did it come about?
Yeah, a little bit of all of that. I grew up in Queens as a Yankee fan. My dad was a Yankee fan, so I take the subway here to the Bronx, and it was no greater thrill for me than to come out of the darkness, and you could look into the old Yankee Stadium as soon as you got out of the dark and your eyes adjusted and saw the greenest grass you'd ever seen in your life. You know, having watched games in black and white, that was a thrill. So we really was fueled by the Yankees. I don't think I appreciated the other sports as much. I was a Mickey Mantle fan. And when I got to college at Syracuse, I knew I had some interest in radio. And I showed up at the radio station and said I wanted to play music. I wanted to be a disc jockey. And they said, well, everyone wants to do that. You know, would you like to read the scores on Saturday night? And I said, I can do that. I honestly didn't think that I could read the sports scores. I thought, number one, you had to be a genius, and number two, you had to be a former athlete, because the people who did the job that I wound up doing on the local sports news were all former football giants. Pat Summerall, Frank Gifford, and Kyle Rote were on the three major stations. So now, as you know, any idiot can go on the air, including me. But at the time, I thought
I wouldn't go there.
No, but at the time,
You're
I thought,
retired. You could say that. I can't.
At the time, I thought you had to be some kind of a sports genius, and that's how I started doing sports.
You know, it just, you mentioned it, and it's actually very similar. When I actually started, it was the same thing. I went to college radio, and I was ready to be a DJ. And one day, somebody said to me, you know, you can do the news. I was like, could do the news.
I can do the news. My dad's famous quote, I wanted to major in broadcasting at Syracuse. My dad wouldn't let me. His quote was, there's only one Walter Cronkite.
There you go.
Yeah,
well, now there's only one Len Berman.
Well,
there you go. I'm
nice.
sure that's what he's thinking right now. Then you did play-by-play, and you did that for a while.
I did. I always weaved it in with newscasts. I think I've been involved with newscasts since 1970 in one way or another. But along the way, when I was in Boston, I did the Boston Celtics games with Bob Cousy. I did New England Patriots preseason football. I was the first television voice of the Big East Conference when they formed in 1979-80 with the likes of Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullen. Did some boxing, did some NFL football. So I've done some play-by-play, but primarily I was like a news guy.
How good a play-by-play person were you? I don't think, thinking back now, I don't think I've ever heard a tape.
Well,
are there tapes out there?
ESPN Classic every so often shows a Big East championship game from Madison Square Garden. Oh, if there were no tapes, I'd tell you I was great. But there are tapes out there,
proof.
so I was okay.
Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I just didn't want to do it on a full-time basis. Taking nothing away from the gentlemen and the ladies who do it, I didn't want to do 162 baseball games, for example. The thought of a 3-game road trip to Cleveland and then 3 games in Kansas City and 3 games in Chicago to a sports fan and people who like to live in hotel, that sounds very exciting. But I always wanted to get home. My thing in broadcasting was I always took the last plane out of New York and the first plane back.
So you
I just wanted to be
do
home.
the job.
I want to be with the
get
family.
home.
Yep.
And so the anchor thing was something that you really wanted to do. It wasn't like one of those things where they said, gee, we need an anchor. How about Lenny? That kind of thing.
Well, you know what? I viewed myself more as a producer. So when I was putting sportscasts together, even at the beginning, I tried to put myself on camera as little as possible. I didn't consider myself a performer, as a broadcaster kind of is. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to produce. I wanted to put fun highlights together, fun interviews, something. I wanted the viewer at home to go, huh, I didn't know that. Because they're watching, even people watching the show right now may be nodding off. Wake up out there. I mean, but
they're not nodding off.
No, but
they're real happy. No. It's the 18th anniversary.
But where's the cake? I wanted the person at home to go, huh. So, of course, some guy wrote in Newsday that I wanted the audience to go, huh?
Well, it's all the inflection.
Lost in translation.
As some folks may not know, but as you well know, I worked as a field producer at Channel 4 for you for a couple of years.
What happened to you? I thought, all of a sudden one day you were gone.
Here it was.
You had your own show in the Bronx. That's it.
I always admired the fact that you were able to take a complex sporting event, like a game that went into extra innings or a hockey game that was double overtime, and pull out the 3 highlights and along with it weave that into what you wrote and really explain a complex event. Is there a trick to that? Is there something that you think about when you say, okay, now I got 16 innings to deal with. How am I going to tell people in 3 cuts what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know if it's true, but I once had an English teacher who claimed that Thomas Jefferson said the hardest thing in the world to write is a short letter. So I think that's really kind of an art form. One piece of advice I got at that college radio station way back when is this news director said, write short sentences. So I was always thinking in short terms. Like I could tell a story in 8 seconds of a home run. Scores 4-2, second inning, Piazza hits it, it's gone, Mets take the lead 5, whatever. That's 8 seconds. So, I mean, you sort of learn the shortcuts, and you really have to cut. You're given a short amount of time. It's not the amount of time you ever get on the air, it's what you do with it. And I really learned how to try to do a lot with a little.
And part of that is knowing your audience, and Len, of course, knows I'm a big Met fan, so he went right away to show that Piazza put us ahead in the game, and I really appreciate it.
Speaking of audience, as you know, they would tell us all the time in the newscast that most of the people watching weren't sports fans. So the trick was to tailor your, they were tuned into the late news to watch the weather, or they tuned in early for Jay Leno and happened to catch you by accident. So the whole idea was that we were in many respects broadcasting to non-sports. I used to call it, broadcasting to the sports impaired. So I learned how to draw the fine line. You didn't want to alienate the sports fans, but you wanted to draw the non-sports fans in to understand what you're talking about.
This really, and now I want to get to thatsports.com, and then soon after we're going to talk about this book. Notice we're getting right to it. The idea of thatsports.com, and it's right up there on the homepage. You say that sports should be fun, but right on the homepage you say this is for the non-sports fans. Explain to me why you would have a sports website for non-sports fans, and then what goes into your thinking to present it.
Well, I send out a daily email. I call it my top 5, and I try to pick subject matter that may come up at the water cooler. I maintain, and I may be the only one, that the majority of people are not sports fans. I'm going to repeat that. The majority of people, in my view, are not sports fans.
Say it ain't so, Len. That can't be.
But I think they're intimidated into thinking that they are in the minority because of look at the front page of the Daily News today.
Both pages of the
front and back
today.
So it's also, and many days it's front and back sports.
Right.
There are 16 channels of ESPN Day Sport Day in all languages. There are, 2 full-time sports talk radio stations in New York, and it's just people who aren't sports fans. Okay, so this all began was I have 2 sons and a daughter, but my 2 sons are not huge sports fans. One of them's a lawyer, and he called me after the Super Bowl and said, "Hey, tell me a few things about the game, just so the guys in the office think I know what I'm talking about." So I would do a little, the defenses ruled the day, and whatever it was, so I view my email as a cheat sheet for people who want to know what they're talking about, want to join the conversation, but really couldn't name the coach of the Devils if his life depended on it.
I'd like to actually promote the concept because as somebody who worked for you and watched you on Channel 4, basically what you get when you sign up for thatsports.com totally free is an email, personal email from Len Berman telling you what the sports is every day. As I've told you, it's like my therapy in the middle of my working day. I get to say, oh wow, sports is going on. Yeah. So people, you get up in the morning and basically put together the sportscast just in a different medium every day.
I do, and I may write it several days in advance. I mean, there are stories that'll slide.
Oh, don't tell us that. I think you're up there at 6 a.m.
Well, I am, but I'm just tweaking it. At 6 a.m. The main stories, unless something monumental happened overnight,
right.
A blown umpire call, a replacement referee making an incredibly bad call in Seattle, which he and the league still defend to this day. So I will rewrite in the mornings, but I'll try to work in it.
And I just want to personally recommend the idea of it. So go to thatsports.com, www.thatsports, 2 S's in the middle, and just you put your email address in there, right. and you get an email from Len. And if you're a sports fan or a non-sports fan, it's a great way to keep in touch. It keeps you entertained.
Well, I should say it's number 1 is free. Number 2, there's no spam. We don't give out addresses, so people don't have to be worried about telling us their email address.
Well, but I will tell you that he takes email feedback, and I do send, and we all send stuff in.
I'm tired of hearing from you. Right? Keep it to yourself. Who cares anymore?
I'm sure it is. And so the GA that he writes about is me. Anyway, which brings us now to this book, because the whole idea, it would seem to me, for you is you want to kind of, as you said, get people to go, that's interesting about sports. Tell me why children's books? Why, you wrote one adult book. Why books for kids? This is your 3rd or 4th?
4th. Wait a second. This is my 5th kids book. It's amazing.
Wow.
I wrote that adult book, Spanning the World, which kind of talked about broadcasting and my experiences in it and sports. At the same time, we put together a paperback book for a different publisher that was called And Nobody Got Hurt, based on Spanning the World bloopers. So it was just a series of one-line or paragraph sports bloopers. And then we came out of volume 2 of that. Well, a different publisher came to me and said, we view this, it looks like a coffee table book, even though it's for young readers. And the idea is that the first book was Greatest Moments in Sports, which actually made a New York Times bestseller list. The second book was the 25 Greatest Baseball Players of All Time, which was a tough book to do because how do you limit it to 25? And I got so much grief from people around the country. Thank goodness I didn't choose the 25 in the book.
You didn't?
No,
he's passing the
I had a blue ribbon panel. Blame Bernie Williams and Ralph Branca and Frank DeFord and Chris Mad Dog Russo and the other people who were on my panel. And now this one, which I did not want to write, so I take no credit for Greatest Moments in Sports, Upsets, and Underdogs. I wanted this book to be Craziest Moments in Sports.
Of which you are an expert because of Spanning the World.
Spanning the World, but really talk about the classic crazy moment, like Merkel's famed boner play for the Giants, the New York Giants way back when, or Wrong Way Regals, he runs the wrong way for a touchdown. Those kinds of things. Publisher said no. Publisher thought this. So I had one question, as most authors do. You going to pay me to write this? And they said yes.
And you said,
I said, this is the book.
Underdogs it
This
is
the book I want to write.
Yeah, right.
Don't you love it when they have actors or actresses or authors on talk shows and they says, "What was your motivation?" And just once you want to hear Sean Penn say, "Because they paid me too much money, and that's why I did." But that's the real reason why he did. But as I was writing this, and I don't want to sound too spiritual
well,
here.
let me ask you something first of all, because what they do is they you pick out kind of really underdog stories, which we all remember, The Miracle on Ice, the Bill Buckner play, and any number of them. Before we get to what you were going to say, did you choose these, or was there a blue ribbon panel or a publisher who said, "Hey, Len, this is what we want in your book"?
I came up with about 30, 35 ideas. What the publisher does, and it's smart, is they want to touch all sports and touch all demographics. So there's stories of boys, girls, blacks, whites, Latino, Asian American, Native American, and 2 handicap stories. I want to, and it turned out, I said it's not spiritual, I want a young person to read this and say, "Wait a second, that person there, that person may look like me. Maybe I can do it too." And I think a young person reading it's a story about their stories of overcoming the odds and overcoming obstacles, from Jim Abbott with one hand to Althea Gibson, who grew up poor in Harlem and had to ride the back of the bus in North Carolina, and then winds up shaking hands with the Queen of England after she wins Wimbledon. So stories of overcoming.
And why not? Why for kids? Why not just? I mean, adults would be interested in stories like that.
I guess the publisher has aimed this as for a young reader.
So it wasn't really that you say, "Gee whiz, I always wanted to write."
I'm going to write
kid
book.
Right.
In fact, my literary agent said, "You really don't write kids' books to earn a living or to make a lot of money. It is a way of giving back." Now, having said that, I'm not opposed to making some royalties on the book.
Right.
But I do go to schools, and I was at a school the other day, and you talk to elementary school kids, and their eyes, light up, and it's fun to talk to kids.
The way that the language that you used as a sportscaster and sports anchor, and you talked about you write in short sentences, to me, as I was reading the book, I was looking through it and saying, this is in a way the same language, because you always use a lower denominator when you're working in broadcasting. So to me, it seemed like a natural fit. Frankly.
Well, I had two. First of all, I don't like to talk down to kids, so I would try to speak as I would speak to an adult. I try not to use big words, but a few of them are in there.
A few big words.
Well, but I think I think they'd enjoy it. That's all.
And maybe be inspired. I like what you said before. Maybe be inspired by it and say, you know what, maybe I can do that too. I'm going to ask some more about the book, but Phil from Co-op City is joining us. So let's see what Phil's got on his mind. Nice to have you with us, Phil. What's up?
Hi, how you doing?
I know we had problems with the phones earlier. We're going to have Phil with us?
Yes. Hello?
If not, I'm going to proceed with the...
Hello?
We'll talk about the book. If we can get Phil, that'd be great.
Hello? Hello?
I was just curious, did you have a favorite story, number one, when researching? A lot of it
Maybe
is...
Phil's there.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should cut that and maybe take the question from Phil and we can relay it to Len Berman. But did you have favorite stories? I was thinking that maybe the young man, which I remember you had covered it, the Jason McElwain story.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. It's
a
great story.
Or the Jim Abbott throwing a no-hitter is a great story. Did you have a favorite one in here or something that you said I really want to tell about?
Well, as I was writing the Jason McElwain story, I said to the publisher, this has to be the last story. Here's an autistic youngster, highly functioning. He's the student manager of the basketball team at a high school near Rochester, and he sits on the bench his entire high school career, and he says he had two responsibilities, hand out towels and cheer for the team. The last game, the coach lets him suit up. On top of that, with 4 minutes and 19 seconds to go, the coach lets him into the game. And he proceeds to miss the first 2 shots he takes, but Jason's not shy. He may be highly functioning autistic. He ain't shy. Starts chucking up shots, one right after, and he keeps hitting them. He scores 20 points to lead the team in scoring. He sets a school record with 6 3-pointers. When the game ends, fans pour out of the stands and carry Jason off the court on their shoulders. He says the coolest part is when he got to school the next day, even the pretty girls who wouldn't even talk to him would now come up and say hello to him. On top of that, President George W. Bush is flying to Buffalo on Air Force One. He diverts the plane to Rochester and gets off and meets Jason and his parents. So I don't know how you can top that.
I was about to say who wouldn't be inspired. That's what the page looks like. And for those of us who don't who like pictures, there are certainly plenty of pictures.
But they were big time sports. Your Mets are in there, the Miracle Mets, and the Joe Namath Super Bowl III, his guarantee.
The Mookie Wilson story.
No, that's not in there.
The Mookie Wilson and
Bill Buckner.
Buckner
No.
is
That's
not
in the previous
there.
book.
All right.
That's
The Giants win the pennant, of course, is in there. There's also a CD. Talk to me about the CD that goes along, an audio CD. That, I guess, helps illuminate the stories for the young people.
Well, it's fun because they took 10 of the moments,
right?
And they took the original play-by-play calls, and then I wove some narration between them. But we're familiar with Russ Hodges, and when Bobby Thompson hits the dramatic home run in 1952, the Giants win the pennant. The Giants. But some young people might go, what? Who? They didn't understand the idea. And I tried to explain in the book that Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants shared the same city. Not only did the fans hate each other in those days, the players hated each other. There was real animosity. And these two Giants are trailing by 13 and a half games mid-August. They come back and forge a 3-game playoff, bottom of the 9th inning, trailing by 2. Thompson wins.
You tell this story. Of course, I know it almost like I know my own name, even though I wasn't alive. But of course, I've heard it. But of course, young people may not have heard it, and so it makes for a great Christmas gift. And available, I assume, wherever.
Wherever. But you know what I hear? What's very nice is parents and grandparents will tell me they share the stories, so they know the stories, but they share it through their child or grandchild's eyes for the first time, and that's really illuminating to them.
And other feedback that you get on it so far?
Well,
I mean, it's just been out just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, not on this one. The baseball book, I got awful feedback. Like fans in Detroit says, "Where's Al Kaline?" and fans in Pittsburgh says, "Where's Roberto Clemente?" And
you didn't have Clemente in the top 25?
He would have been in my top 20. How about if I told you Sandy Koufax wasn't it? Don't get me started.
Oh my goodness gracious! Let's talk about a couple of sports issues and other things that are memorable for you. Is there a wackiest spanning the world moment that you have?
It's tough.
I mean, there were so many. I mean,
it's tough. It's tough to beat the horse that got bar mitzvahed. There was a horse at a trotting track in Orange County. Where's Monticello? Is that Sullivan County or Sullivan County?
It's Sullivan County.
All right. So the horse turns 13, and her owner has the horse bar mitzvahed, parades it around, reads a few Jewish prayers, has a little wine. Okay. So the kicker to the story is I showed this clip at a speaking engagement in Boca Raton, Florida, and wouldn't you know it, there's a rabbi in the audience. So now I get nervous at saying
that you're doing something sacrilegious
exactly.
or something like that.
So the rabbi stands up and does one of these, and he says, no, there's nothing in the liturgy that says you cannot perform religious rites on animals. So I felt very relieved. But of course, as rabbis are wont to do, he wasn't finished talking. And he said, that wasn't much of a bar mitzvah. I said, I know. I live on Long Island. I know that. You're not telling me. He said, that was not. He says, but you know what? This is what the rabbi said. It must have been one hell of a bris. So that's my spanning the world. Wackiest moment.
You kind of can't do better than that. I thought you were going to say, I don't know, the memorable one that I found for you was when we had Mr. Met doing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game"
in Yiddish.
In Yiddish.
Yeah,
Hebrew,
Yiddish.
Right?
I remember a producer who shall remain nameless.
Yeah.
A friend of ours came up to me and said, "I found the greatest highlight in South Africa. They parade all these elephants around town." And they all bet, the local tribesmen bet on which elephant has the largest, you can imagine what. So, and this producer thought, what a great highlight this would be. The funny thing was, how do you determine which elephant has the big? Well, there's a guy with a 10-foot pole, which is maybe where that's the expression. He would go around measuring. And my producer could never understand why I never used that clip and sped it in. That wasn't you, by the way.
I was about to say, I appreciate that you saved it for our show. That really, I'm totally honored.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. Yeah. You had said in one of the That Sports emails that you watched the Bucky Dent home run game sitting next to John Havlicek.
Yes.
That seems to me to be mind-blowing. Did you have a number of, like, I got to pinch myself moments where you said, gee, I'm standing here at the World Series or the Super Bowl?
Oh, sure.
Give me one that would be.
Well, how about
I want to ask you a couple of current sports issues before we run out of time.
How about walking up to my hero, Mickey Mantle, at Old Timers Day? I grew up idolizing Mickey Mantle. When I was 9 years old, I wrote in for his autograph, and he actually signed it and sent it back to me. I had read later that Mickey Mantle would only answer fan mail from young women. No, I don't know why. But so
I'm sure we can guess.
When I met the Mick for the first time, I said, Mickey, you signed my autograph through the mail, and I read you only answered mail from young women. He said, you must write like a girl. My hero.
There you go. There you go. So that was your pinch yourself moment. I got the question that Phil wanted to ask. You want to know, why do so many sportscasters come from the Bronx and New York City? Now, that's interesting. I don't know how many from the Bronx. Well, we've had some.
Well,
Vince Scully went to school right
Fordham,
down the road
Mike
here.
Green, Fordham.
Yeah. So any thoughts on that?
Yes, I have many thoughts on that.
Don't take too long, we're almost out of time.
Now I remember what I wanted to say about writing to kids. I don't use cliches. So that was, I was going through my mind. So what did I mean to tell you? That I try to write in plain English. Why out of New York? Well, the question I'm always asked is why so many sportscasters went to Syracuse. Because I went to Syracuse. Right. Bob Costas, Marv Albert, Dick Stockton, Mike Tirico, Ian Eagle, Sean McDonough. I'm sure I've left out a few. All went to Syracuse.
You know them off the top of your head.
Well, and you know the reason for that? None of us could get into Cornell.
But to me, the thought on New York City is that we just have so much sports.
So much sports, and that's it.
So many different sports questions to ask you. Are the Yankees going to do it?
It's hard to see it. I mean, as we sit here, they can't get a base hit, and they've lost their captain, and they don't have their closer. It's tough.
Well, you know what? If they do, maybe it'll be one of the next.
There are no Yankees in this. People say we're the
they
Yankees.
Are underdogs.
They're never underdogs.
Are we headed for replay in baseball?
Yeah, more of it. I still don't think it should be on the bases, despite the blown call in game number 2. I think there's too many variables: foot, ball, glove, touch, not touch, high angles.
And then, you and I have interacted on that. I don't think they should be placing runners around. You're going to have chaos.
Trap ball. Yeah, you've written about that. That's a great point. If you overrule a trap ball, where do the runners go and what?
And you'll be assigning runs and everything else. Len, we got to run.
That's it.
I got only 80 more questions to ask, but the book is Greatest Moments in Sports, Upsets, and Underdogs, and the great Len Berman. Len, it's just
and happy
wonderful.
anniversary. That's
Thank
great.
you. 18 years on this show. But, folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show, I'll forward them to Len and get you an answer. Or do it yourself on thatsports.com. You can email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com or sign up for thatsports.com, which is free. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Also, we invite you to become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. Len's on Facebook, too. You can do that whole thing. Next week, totally different show. You know how it goes over here. We'll have a debate for the open council seat in the 12th City Council District, formerly held by Larry Seabrook. Then the week after, which will be a week before the election, we'll present a program on candidates in the Green Party. We'll have the party's U.S. Senate candidate here, as well as the Bronx leader of the Green Party, and maybe some surprise guests as well. And so on this 18th anniversary of our program, I want to thank our producer, Jane Folloro. She's been with us for just about all of those 18 years. Also, Director Michael Arias, studio assistant Dina, and the cast of thousands around us. Special thank you to Len Berman for coming in tonight. I'm going to get him to sign my copy of the book. And we'll see you next week. Good night.
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.